All right, let's see if we can get it right this time. Hello, everyone. My name's J Lockhart. I am the director of the International Institute of Humanology, and I am connecting live again to present a new edition of Human Dialogues to you. It is with great pleasure that I connect from Spain. I'm in the northwest of Spain. Very happy to be here to discuss another human topic. As you know, every month we approach a human topic at the Institute. We discuss it in different events, including the one that I'm about to introduce today, Human Dialogues. Every month we interview somebody a little bit in depth to discuss the topic of the month. As you may already know, the topic we're discussing today is none other than the fear of failure. An important topic, isn't it? Well, today I am thrilled to be able to introduce a very special speaker, somebody whom I'm sure is going to inspire you and is going to give you a lot of food for thought. I'm talking about Greg Jenkins. Greg Jenkins is a dedicated and passionate diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, practitioner, and lifelong learner. He completed a successful over 28-year U.S. Army career that ranged from overseas duties in Germany, South Korea, and combat duty in Iraq to include several stateside assignments culminating in Washington, D.C. While serving in uniform, Greg's performance leading military equal opportunity efforts resulted in developing a model program for other U.S. Army equal opportunity and human relations advisors. His performance further resulted in his selection to the Army's Diversity Task Force at the Pentagon, which helped to establish the Army's diversity program, policies, and products. He was instrumental in the planning and execution of the Army's diversity marketing campaign, achieving worldwide coverage for the Army's 1.4 million soldiers, civilians, and their family members. Greg directly served and represented senior executive leaders at the local, state, nonprofit, corporate, and Department of Defense levels. Now, after successfully completing his Army career, Greg continues to provide diversity, equity, and inclusion, high-performance organization development, facilitation, instruction, research and analytics, strategy, curriculum development, and delivery. As a diversity consultant, Greg has provided a range of services to various federal and state government agencies, including the VA, USDA, U.S. Army Reserve, SBA, and the National Guard, among others. Furthermore, Greg's corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion experience includes work with wealth management, finance, insurance, manufacturing, higher education, major U.S. city administrative centers, global beverage conglomerates, and so on. He holds an MA in Masters in Human Resources Development, as well as a globally recognized diversity, equity, and inclusion social media influencer. His most recent appointment to the Defense Advisory Committee on Diversity and Inclusion provides another opportunity to serve the U.S. military and its citizenry as a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional. Greg is a published author who focuses on family, friends, physical fitness, reading, and loves to volunteer and mentor, where he also provides leadership coaching for business professionals, U.S. military service members, and veterans. And I also know that he happens to love racing and running. Greg, wow, what a CV! Welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you with us today. Hello.
Hi, Jessica. So glad to be here with you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here with us. It's a great pleasure. It's a great honor, too. We're going to be talking about something today that is, in theory, not so close to equity, the equality, inclusion, diversity, but I think it really is. We're talking about tips to defeat self-sabotage. Let me first ask you what self-sabotage means to you, Greg. What would you say it is?
Well, you know, Jessica, that's a really good place to start. Self-sabotage refers to, the intentional actions or even inactions that undermine people's progress and prevents them from accomplishing their goals. That pretty much sums it up. And it can also serve as a coping mechanism for things that, when we're presented with stress and uncertainty and we don't know what to do or how to do it, we sometimes will self-sabotage in an effort to cope with these things that we're having a hard time dealing with.
Yeah, and I think that every human being has some moments in their lives in which they go through those processes and they sabotage themselves. Do you recall any such moments?
Oh, sure. I have my own moments of self-sabotage. I think when I was at the 20-year mark in my Army career, my plan was I was going to go ahead and retire. I had just come out of a combat duty in Iraq, and for those that may not be familiar with military service, once you get to the 20-year mark, you can request to retire. Request is a key word there, because I requested to retire, and the Army said, "No, no, not yet. We want you to learn about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then we want you to take a leadership role." And my response to that was, a little frustration and anxiety. And because I'm an older white straight male, and I don't know what those topics had to do with me. And so I was very hesitant, but I think I have to admit, though, that part of my hesitancy was because I wasn't confident. I think I was self-sabotaging myself as I was getting ready to go into that industry. But I quickly became an advocate and learned a lot of things about that topic and about how to where self-sabotage can come from, examples of those kinds of behaviors, and then what we can do to help stop or at least mitigate self-sabotage.
And I'm sure you're going to give us quite a few tips on that, because that's precisely what we want to discuss tonight. You were sabotaging yourself. You just said it, but you still went ahead and did it. So what helped you? What did you do to overcome that self-sabotage? Do you recall?
I think part of it was because I was in the Army, and, the Army is it's a driven place, about accomplishment and succeeding. And so I think I had the advantage of already having 20 years of experience in the military. Once I kind of, consumed this new challenge that I really wasn't very confident about, I really kind of went back to all the other things I've done over my years to make, accomplish things moving forward. But I think it's important to understand that not everybody has 20 years of Army experience to stand upon, right? And so I think it's important, Jessica, for us to just kind of talk about, what might cause self-sabotage before we get to the highlights. But I have some of those to share.
Okay.
A couple things that can, growing up in a dysfunctional family can be a cause of that. If you've had parents or caregivers or other authority figures that told you as you were growing up that you weren't good enough, you weren't going to amount to very much, and we start believing those kinds of things, that's called introjection, is to where an authority figure tells you something, and because you look up to that person and you think whatever they say is true and right and must be the way I am, we swallow those things whole, if you will. And so that can be, that can set us up for believing that we're not good enough sometimes. So where it comes from is a good thing for us to talk about.
Yeah, because beliefs at the end of the day are our guiding principles. Whatever we believe, we end up turning into realities, because if you believe you're not capable enough, you will never be capable enough. You will sabotage yourself to confirm your belief. That's the confirmation bias that we all suffer from.
Oh, it sure can be. And it can be also even, beyond your family. So a spouse, a partner, a supervisor, managers, bosses, if these folks that you interact with, they don't support you and they talk down to you, right, it can become a confirming bias or a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think so. Let's say, for example, that I think my my confirmation bias is that people don't want to talk with me, wherever I got that idea from. So if I go to a party and I hide in the corner and nobody talks to me, I confirm my bias. Like, see, nobody wants to talk to me, and it becomes self-fulfilling. And that can be a really vicious circle, that we seek out those things that will confirm what we believe about ourselves, even though when they might not even be true at all, but we've been told enough times by enough people that we believe it.
Yeah, no, totally. And some of those beliefs can be established in our minds at a very, very early age. You know, it's not just the parents, it's the whole environment we grow up in. It's our classroom teachers, it is in church sometimes, or, you know, whatever community you share time with. All those shared beliefs can become yours. And the funny thing is that you might not even be aware that you have those beliefs, and they
That's very
become subconscious beliefs.
That's very, very true. And, I think it makes a good argument for, there's the old saying, you're the average of the 5 people that you associate most with. And I think that's a pretty good adage. Because do we ever take a step back and go, well, what are the messages I'm getting from the people that I associate the most with? Because some of us have really, really good people that are very supportive and very positive, and that's a good thing to have in one's life. But if we're surrounded by people that are putting us down, are negative, don't believe in our dreams and aspirations, man, that's tough, because like we're talking now, we can start believing, or I can start believing that, my dream really isn't valid, or maybe my skills aren't as good as they think they were, because people are disconfirming what I think I'd like to believe in myself. So yeah, it really matters.
So self-sabotage can come from introjection, that is, believing what some figures of authority share with us. Other reasons why we might self-sabotage.
Well, I think a lack of confidence, a lack of support. Even if I don't have somebody telling me I'm not good enough, I may just have an absence of support and promotion. And, self-sabotaging can show up in a number of ways. One way is procrastination. So if I don't feel confident, I don't feel like I'm supported, that belief may manifest itself in a behavior of putting off the task, putting off the work, putting off the class, the speech that I was supposed to write and give, the client that I'm supposed to meet up with, whatever it is. And if I manifest it that way, I'll put it off, I'll procrastinate. And because it's something that it's a coping mechanism. If I just kick the can down the road a little bit further, I don't have to come face to face with that stress that I'm not prepared to engage. So procrastination is one way that it shows up. Another way too, Jessica, is kind of just maybe not the opposite, but on a very different part of the scale, and it's perfectionism.
Yeah.
I've got to do everything perfectly because I was told I wasn't good enough, or if I made a small mistake, it was highlighted. And so everything has to become perfect that I do, which can be just as damaging as procrastinating, because then I'll start to, if it's not perfect, I'll get upset, more anxiety. I'll give up because, hey, I couldn't do it perfectly. So yeah, procrastination and perfectionism can be ways in which those beliefs manifest.
Yeah. I would even say there's one more that is sometimes not that well known, perhaps, and that is rewards. When your self-sabotage gives you something that you value, and this something can be something negative, okay? When you fail and that somehow makes you vanish into your peers or not stand out, that might be reward enough to sabotage yourself. So negative rewards are sometimes a great motivator for sabotaging yourself, I would say. Would you agree?
Yeah, I could see how that would be the case too, because again, I think if you boil it down to, I don't believe enough of myself. to do something. So any avenue that allows me to hide or divert or reject or justify, these can manifest in a lot of different ways. Here's another one, is self-medication. So
Yeah.
right. So it's a constant battle for me. I'm anxious, I'm nervous, I don't feel comfortable. And I may find that I can soothe myself with alcohol, with drugs, and then even sometimes with self-injury. Now we're talking about, the very, the difficult end of this conversation. But sometimes manifestation can show up in what becomes a drinking problem, as an example, right? Because we find solace there. We can hide in that alcohol, for example, or it allows us to forget what we're struggling with. The problem, of course, is it doesn't fix it. It just exacerbates the problem. So there can be a number of things.
No, there surely can, for sure. But we know now how this can happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
But having your history in the military wouldn't allow self-sabotage so much, would it? It would not be so accepted, I guess.
Well, I don't think here's how I would characterize that. It wouldn't be that the military doesn't allow self-sabotage. It's, do you allow yourself to become sabotaged? And so I think maybe in my experience, now there's a lot of people that have been in all various militaries from around the world, not just the US. And so there are going to be, men and women who've experienced their military experience very differently than I have, perhaps. But I think, again, as I was saying at the beginning of this, the US military was very good at helping me create an identity, to build up confidence, to build up skill sets, talent. And those things really reinforced my ability to defeat self-sabotage when it was presented to me. Or I'm sorry, when I presented it to myself, right? Because it's me that's determining if do I have the skills and the confidence to do this. Like I said about, the Army saying, we want you to learn diversity, equity, and inclusion and go learn it. That was a little frightening to me. I didn't know anything about that topic. I didn't know about that subject. How was I going to be perceived, right? And but as I dug down, as I was wrestling with that anxiety, I was like, wait a minute. I've got 20 years in the Army. I've been to combat. I've lived in Germany for 10 years. I've been stationed in South Korea. I have all this evidence of these accomplishments. And I'm like, I think I can handle this. But again, we may be talking to folks in your audience that don't have that foundation to stand on. So what can they do is a good question for us to have a conversation about.
Welcome to that in a minute, because you mentioned something that I also wanted to highlight, which is you spent 10 years in Germany and you were in other places in the world. And when you move to another country, there are also some cases in which we sabotage ourselves. The language, or integrating in the culture, or making friends. It's sometimes not that easy, and a lot of people tend to sabotage themselves. Did you know people when you were in Germany that suffer from that had that kind of situation too?
Yeah, I did, Jessica. That's interesting you're bringing that up. So when I was in Germany, I guess the way I looked at it was, I was like, wow, what an opportunity. I'm in this completely different culture, different language, customs, traditions, courtesies, all those things, right? And so I was really excited about it. So the way I interpreted or perceived that experience was, it was a great opportunity. But there were a number of other soldiers, not a lot, but there was enough of them that I took notice that they wouldn't, when we were done training for the day, they would go back to the barracks and they would stay, in their barracks rooms. They wouldn't go downtown. They wouldn't go to museums. They wouldn't go to the sights and sounds that were all over the place that we were experiencing at that time in West Germany. I'm dating myself here. So I can see when I would talk to some of those service members, it'd be like, well, why don't you want to come downtown with us or go on, a bus tour to another German city? And it was interesting that they would be negative about it, like, oh, they didn't want to waste their time, but looking back now, that was, I think, in a lot of ways, that was their manifestation of their self-sabotage. They didn't know how to speak the language. They didn't feel comfortable with this difference in the way the culture was from their culture. And so now, having a better understanding of my own self and others, you can see how that showed up for some folks.
Yeah, which is precisely what I was trying to come to, because at the end of the day, we sabotage ourselves before others can see that we're a failure, that we're not good enough. So we'd rather not put ourselves in front of others and be a failure and criticized. We'd rather just withdraw before anything can happen. And that I've seen in the few countries I had the opportunity to live, also with many foreigners, not really interacting or mingling or learning about their culture, the culture, the host culture, because they didn't want to be found faulty or defective in a way. So we've been talking about how this can happen, different situations in which we may find this, different environments. What about tips, Greg? What ideas could you share with our audience that they can use to prevent this from happening to them or to correct it even?
Right. And I think, that's the good next part of our conversation, because there are a number of things that any individual can utilize, tools and best practices and other various resources. I think one of a number of good ways. Let's just go down a couple of them here. First one is just like, can you identify somebody who maybe has a higher level of confidence? There's somebody that you feel that you can speak with, and you can start to develop, a relationship there. And of course, we're talking about, professional relationships or work-related relationships or, that kind of a thing. So finding those folks that, are supportive, and I'll even use the word even mentor as
I was going to say mentorship. Yeah.
Mentorship, coaching is a little bit of a different thing, but somebody that can kind of, show you the ropes. Because I remember when I was in Korea years later after Germany. So now I've already lived in another culture, and now I'm excited to go to another one. But I don't know how to speak Hangul. I don't know. I've never been in Asia, but I knew that I could seek out. We had Korean military members in our organization too, and they were more than happy to show us their country, show us their city. And so seeking out somebody to help show you the ropes is one very good way to start that process of getting you to overcome the sabotage that you may be self-imposing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Mentorship is a great idea, and it applies in almost every field in life. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be professional. Some people think, well, this has nothing to do with work, so how am I going to go about looking for a mentor? Well, there's mentors in all kinds of stages in life, and there's mentors in every field of life. You can look for elder people that have gone through what you're trying to experience right now, and ask them for advice, because well, they've already been there, done that. They might give you some tips and ideas. Any other tips you have for our people today, Greg?
Well, I would like to just add one more thing about mentorship too, and I want to make sure that we're clear here with your audience. There are formal mentoring programs where there's a structure and there's assignments and matching, and that's fine. And those are very effective. There's also informal mentoring. To where, I could just go up, and if we're working in the same organization, perhaps, as an example, Jessica, and I'm new, and I see that you're doing some things that I would like to learn how to do. I could just say, Jessica, hi, my name is Greg, and I'm new here, and would you be open to maybe some informal mentoring? So I would encourage audience members, don't think that you have to wait for somebody to put you into some kind of formal relationship, formal professional relationship. Informal mentoring can be just as effective. So I think that's a good point. Another thing I think is a good tip to help folks is if you have a
Wait,
task.
Greg. Let me
Oh,
let me add something
sure.
there, because
Yeah.
you inspired me to realize that there's a third type of mentorship that people can
Yes.
use, and that is, I would say, invisible mentorship. I mean, the kind of situation in which you look up to somebody who's done what you want to do, but
Uh-huh.
you might not even know the person. You might read their books, you might watch their movies, you might,
Hmm.
there's another indirect type of mentorship that some people benefit from. And you can use that sometimes under certain circumstances to see how they're doing, to see how they're coping with the situation you're going to face or you want to tackle. So there are some cases in which you can use the experiences of others without even knowing them. And I just wanted to throw it out there because some people might be
Yeah.
inspired to look for somebody like that.
Yeah. And I think what I'm hearing you say are you're identifying role models.
Yes.
So somebody, right, somebody that is
Yeah,
in
true.
my industry or something, a subject that I'm interested in, and they have exceeded, or they're leading in that particular field. Absolutely. I think that's another good way of thinking about that, Jessica, of finding out, well, if he or she did this, how did they do it? Let me read their book, their article, their white paper, their biography, or their LinkedIn, or whatever it is that gives me a little bit more insights. I think that's a very good idea. That's another tool that we're talking about here. Another one would be if we're faced with a large, and I know large can be a relative term, but a large task to you might be, a huge task for me, or a smaller task. But I think the idea of chunking, and chunking is basically taking a large task and breaking it into a lot of smaller little parts and pieces. I can't climb Mount Everest in 2 steps. I have to take a many, 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 many little tiny steps to get to the top of a mountain. And I think sometimes we get a little overwhelmed, or I've even got overwhelmed by a task that I was assigned, and it was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. But I had good mentors and I had other good support around me that said, wait a minute, you don't have to do everything at once. Let's just break this into pieces. And so I think breaking things down into very small, easy pieces is a very, very effective tool as well, because not only are you can consume smaller parts and pieces, right? It also, every time you accomplish a little teeny tiny achievement, you get to celebrate a little bit. Hey, I did that, So I think that's a good thing, because otherwise we're going to get into this. It's an all or nothing kind of unhealthy attitude about things. And then what do? We throw in the towel. I want to work out in the gym. I want to run a marathon. I want to write a book. I want to, whatever it is. Can we break it into small little pieces?
Yeah, I totally, fully agree with you. We usually call it Kaizen at the Institute because it's taken from the Japanese manufacturing style, in which they do precisely that. They take huge, complex operations and they just chunk it down into pieces that they can more or less handle with greater ease.
Yeah, I think there's a book that comes to mind that I really, really enjoyed reading, and the book is entitled Atomic Habits, and
Yes.
the author of that book is James Clear, and he uses that word atomic because tiny habits,
Atoms, yeah.
and there are numbers of books like that, but that's exactly what he's proposing. It's that little teeny tiny incremental steps towards a goal are very, very effective in accomplishing a goal that we're trying to go after. So, don't think that I've got to accomplish this. I can't just go, I'm going to run a marathon next week and I'm just now going to start running. It doesn't work that way. Either that or you're really, really strong and healthy and fast, but that's not most people. So we have to, figure out how to do that. Get a running coach, learn about, do I have the right kind of shoes? What kind of exercises? Instead of running 26 miles, I start running 1 mile, and then 1.5 miles and 2 miles and that kind of a thing, and breaking it down. I
And
think
there's
there's,
something you said there, Greg, that I think
yeah,
is really, really important. And a lot of people neglect to do it.
right.
And you said we need to celebrate our achievements.
Big
That's
time.
so important. Yes, because that's going to first make us feel good. Why? Because our brain is going to be releasing a lot of chemicals that make us feel good with ourselves. Oxytocin, endorphin, serotonin, all that is going to make us feel great. And because we feel great, we want more of that. And if we get into the habit of celebrating every successful step, then it's going to be easier to continue walking.
Absolutely. And not only do you celebrate and feel good about it, it helps build a little more confidence,
Also,
and a little more surety, and
yeah.
you know, well, wait a minute, I did that. And then now it's like, well, wait a minute, if I could do that 1 mile, I could. Matter of fact, let's not even talk about a mile. If I could run around the block, and wow, I did it. Now I can run around a block 2 times, and then 3 times,
Yes.
and now I tackle a mile, and then a mile and a half. You know, yeah, it really, really matters. There's another thing. There's a study, and I wish I could remember the source of the study, but I just read this not too long ago, and it was about accountability partners.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, accountability partnerships can be really, really powerful. So let me give you an example of what the study was referring to. So let's say I want to quit smoking. Now, I don't smoke now, but I smoked a long time ago. But you know what I did when I was trying to quit is I wouldn't tell anybody. Because if I didn't tell anybody, then if I couldn't quit smoking, well, then I didn't disappoint anybody, right? Because I hadn't told anyone. But with accountability partners, that's a different story. So even before we get to accountability partners, it's just about the publishing of a goal. And studies show that if I smoked and Jessica, you know, I worked with you and I said, you know, Jessica, I'm going to quit smoking. I'm going to quit smoking tomorrow. Now I have told you my goal. My chances of success now are going to go up to 65%.
Yeah.
As an increase in my ability to quit smoking, because I've told you. And now, why would that be? Why is it such a huge dramatic change? Well, because I don't want to appear wishy-washy. I don't want to appear, oh, well, Greg can't, you know, make up his mind, and maybe Greg isn't as strong as he thinks. And I don't want to appear that way. It's my identity's on the line now. And so I think in some ways that tool can be very, very helpful if we've got an audience member that's listening to your show right now. Find somebody, find 5 people, find your family, your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers, and say, hey, I'm going to accomplish X. And it's going to help motivate you because you don't want to let them down now, because they may ask about that, or, you know, you have to come back and say, well, I'm going to, you know, do X, Y, or Z in this time period. And they may come back and say, hey, did you accomplish that goal? And so so that's the motivator. But here's another one, and I think this is even better. And this goes back to what I was saying about accountability partners. So let's say, for an example, again, that I told you that I'm going to run a marathon by the end of this year. And I ask you, I say, Jessica, would you be an accountability partner, and will you check on me at regular intervals to see how I'm doing? And the amazing part about the accountability partnership is that 65% when you just publish your goal goes up to 95% when you have an accountability partner, because now you are asking me, hey, Greg, how many miles did you run this week? Are you meeting your milestones? And are you on track to, did you register for the race? Did you get those new shoes you were talking about? Are you putting in the amount of miles you said you were going to? And because now you're checking on me. And so accountability partnerships are really, really, really powerful. And it's a great tool as well.
Yeah, because it's not just now about self-sabotage. You're not just sabotaging yourself. You're showing others that you can't do it. It's not just yourself that you're talking to, right?
Right.
So being in a relationship with an accountability partner changes everything completely. I fully agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think another thing too, and I just is like, how do we, you know, we talked about, you know, procrastination and self-medication and perfectionism. And, you know, I think in my own experience, because I have accountability partners and I do publish my goals, and I do have mentors. I use these tools. I'm just not reading this off of a cue card. This is things I've done personally. And I think one of the things that was big for me was I had some perfectionist, you know, attributes as well. And I've learned over time, it's okay. And it's like an 80% solution on time is better than 100% solution too late. And I had some good mentors that taught me that. And it took some other people to help me understand that myself. So if we can, kind of whittle down that perfectionism attitude, I think that goes down, and we also, I think, mitigate our procrastination tendencies as well. But I think it's important to know that it isn't going to happen overnight, and it takes some time to build up these skills and this endurance and this stamina, and that confidence.
Well, it took you years to get to the place you are today, where
Oh,
you're
absolutely.
self-sabotaging. So you need a little time to
Exactly.
reverse that habit,
Well, that's the thing too. So forgive yourself. If you don't make that little one step, hey, it's not the end of the world. It's okay. All right. Take a breath. Let's go. Let's get back at it tomorrow. And so forgive yourself. Take it easy on yourself. You're okay. You're doing all right.
There's one more thing that I think a lot of people neglect to do, and that is give yourself appropriate goals. I mean, some people give themselves unattainable goals. So they are going to fail no matter what, is what you were saying. I'm going to climb Mount Everest tomorrow. Well, not only do you need to chunk it down and have smaller pieces to bite, but you also have to have deadlines. You also have to have the resources you need for achieving those goals. Because if you don't have those, either the deadline or the resources, you will fail too. It's not just a matter of making them smaller. It's also a matter of endowing yourself with the tools you need, or the materials you need, or the whatever you need to reach that goal, but also give yourself the right time to do it. Don't try to do it overnight. Don't try to do it in too short a time, because you're going to fail too. And I think those two are important, and people sometimes forget.
What I hear you describing are what we call SMART goals.
SMART goals, yes, totally.
SMART. So S is for specific, right? What is it? Define the goal that you're trying. Don't make it nebulous, or well, I'm really not sure what it is. We got to really make it specific. And then the M, measurable.
Measurable,
Is there a unit of measure that I can apply to this specific goal to let me know, am I making progress, right, or not? Attainable, which is like what you just referred. So, right, I can't just say I'm going to go climb Mount Everest tomorrow, and I've never climbed a mountain. That's unattainable for me at this point. I've got to climb some smaller mountains first. I've got to do some other things that are attainable to me. And then realistic, right, or results based. There's going to be a result. It's something that I'm going to be able to say I did that. And the last one is time bound. I want to run a marathon, but I never tell you when I'm going to do it. So years go by, and you're like, well, did you ever run that marathon?
I will.
I'm going to run it one day. Yeah, we need some deadlines, right? But we need realistic deadlines, right? We need to sit down and think about that, maybe with a mentor, or an accountability partner, and make sure that our goals are specific, measurable, attainable, results oriented, and time bound. So yeah, great point. And another good tool.
Yeah, totally. We've been talking about different tips to help people deal with self-sabotage, but I would say there's preventive tools and corrective tools. So what can we do to prevent self-sabotage in us? What can we do to correct it? I don't think they're the exact same tools. What would you say, Greg? Have you given this any thought?
Yeah, I agree. They are not the same tools. I think here's how I would illustrate a preventive tool. If you find yourself in a group of people, or in a work, and I'll just use a work situation, and you find yourself surrounded with one or two or three people, and the negativity, the lack of support, those kinds of things are occurring. That's not a healthy environment for you to be in. So I think a preventative measure would be to be able to assess a situation and go, this really is not serving me well. Maybe this isn't a good place for me to be. And then figuring out a way that you can move on to find a better team, better coworkers, an organization that has a more positive culture versus one that is toxic and just not good for you. So I think a preventative mindset is really important in that regard. You know, I tell people, you know, when they're going in for an interview, and I'll help them do interview prep, and we'll help them write their resume and do their LinkedIn profile. And I'll tell them, and this is a preventative measure, you know, when you go in and sit down with an organization and you're going in for a job interview, let's assume you got to that part of the phase of a potential hiring into a position. There should be at least 2 interviews happening. The organization is interviewing you to see if you're the best talent that they can find. And then you should be interviewing them.
Yes.
So when the organization says, so why should we hire you? A response to that is, well, why would I want to work here?
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, because, you know, as a preventative measure, I think it's good for all of us to think of ourselves as little tiny one-person corporations, and our little tiny one-person corporations have worth and value. So don't subjugate yourself to a toxic organization or a toxic culture or a toxic leader or supervisor. So that's preventative in that way. And then corrective is once you've identified it, get out.
Totally, I love it. Okay, I have one more question for you,
Sure.
Greg.
Yeah.
We're talking about self-sabotage and how that can be learned at an early age.
Yeah.
As parents, how can we prevent self-sabotage in our kids? How can we stop from spreading it or sharing it to our kids? Because we live in highly competitive environments, extreme. You go to schools and everything is a competition. Children have to compete for everything, at sports, in class, even in arts, you know? How can we help our kids deal with something like this? Do you have any ideas on that?
You know, I do, and it would apply to anybody in a leadership position. And when I say leadership position, I'm also including parents. Because those may arguably be the most important leaders you will ever have in your life, are the people who raise you. They have so much impact on your growth and development, your psyche, how you see yourself, how you see the world, and how you interact in it. And so I would argue that maybe our parents are the most important leaders we will ever have. And so regardless of the leadership position, in this case, I know we're talking about parents, but I'm going to bundle it into anybody that's in a leadership position. I think it's important to know that there are 2 complex and interrelated wellsprings of leadership. And one is the position, the experience, the education, the role, certification, diplomas. And I know that's a broad umbrella. I'm not saying you have to get a diploma to be a parent. You can be a parent without having a diploma. I get that. But I think it's those kinds of things. But the other part, that other wellspring, is about self-awareness, about centeredness, about being grounded, about knowing your own self, right? And I think there are going to be some parents that never maybe grew out of their own self-sabotage, and they may inadvertently cast that down to the next generation, the next generation, and the next generation. Sad to say, but that can and probably unfortunately happens more than it should. And so for parents is that, hey parents, you know, have you taken a step back to learn about your own self and your own self-awareness, your own groundedness? Because if you're not careful, if I'm not careful as a father, which I am a father and a grandfather, am I inadvertently going to pass on my self-sabotaging aspects onto my child? And I don't want to do that at all. I want to be supportive of them. I want to make sure that they're not going to suffer maybe from the self-sabotage that I have suffered, you know, in my growing up.
Well, to those watching this right now, or to anybody who watches it later, I think we heard a lot of fantastic tips, a lot of ideas and proposals Thank you so much, Greg. I found it really, really interesting and inspiring. And I know there will be many comments and a lot of questions. We will be forwarding them to you. Is there anything else, any last message you'd like to share with our audience today?
There is one that I would like to share, and it's going to be to the mentors, the supervisors, the managers, the parents, the leaders, if you will. One of your most powerful tools that you have, if you are interacting with somebody you're trying to help them correct or prevent their self-sabotage, one of your most powerful tools is your listening to them. And I mean truly listening to find out what are they struggling with? What are they dealing with? Oftentimes, the thing we need more than anything is to someone that listens to us and we know that they care what we're saying. And if you take nothing else away from this conversation, I think good leaders, parents, supervisors, the best ones are the ones that are really good listeners and then can respond in a more informed manner to help out that person that they're trying to lead or coach or mentor. So that's what I would share. Be a good listener.
And that's a fantastic message to end this conversation, this human dialogue tonight. Thank you very much, Greg, for being here. I really found it inspiring, and I know our viewers also did and will. I hope to have you on our shows in the future again, because you have a lot to share and a lot to teach our people. Thank you so much, Greg.
Thanks for having me, Jessica. Glad to be here.
Very happy to have had you here. And now to our audience. You know, the next conversation, the next human dialogue will happen March. Let me give you the details. March 18th, no, 11th, March 11th. In March, we're going to be dealing with another very interesting human topic, attachment. And we're going to be discussing when attachment hurts. So don't miss our future human dialogue that will take place next March 11th. And don't forget to subscribe if you didn't do it yet, and to share this with your friends so they can also be inspired. Thank you so very much for being there. Don't forget to leave your comments. This is Jessica Lockhart, Human Dialogues by the International Institute of Humanology. Thank you.